Hey folks, today I'm answering the question, astrology, science or pseudoscience? When you do a Google search for science debunks astrology, you get a bunch of weird answers. I was recently shown this by someone who wanted to argue with me about astrology. So I went ahead and did a up-to-date debunk of all of these points. Even got into ChatGPT to show some deep concepts. I think you're going to really like this. And we're even going to award a Google University Expert in Everything degree. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, click like, share, and leave a positive comment. It does really help to raise the video in the algorithms. And I think this is a pretty important subject today that I'm going to be talking about. So let's dive right in. As you can see, this is a screen that says Science Debunks Astrology. If you Google that, you wind up with this thing that comes back, and it has a bunch of claims. Most of them are really dumb, and I'm going to break them down in this document. I'm going to go over all of this today. One of them is incredibly valid and legit, and you're going to understand why as I get into it. But again, we have to understand that most people think that astrology is a belief system. They think it's like a religion. They think it's pseudoscience, and they think they are just covered by this immunity to ever have to even figure out or know what they're talking about. The way that includes modern scientists like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan years ago. I'm going to talk about that in this video as well. But also just normal people. I had an encounter with someone online who felt like it was completely within his purview to just make me explain and prove that astrology was real, even though I know he knew nothing about it. And he actually took this cut and paste Science Debunks Astrology and just pasted it into a comment section and said, "Here, I really got you now. Go ahead and explain this," as if he really got me or something. So again, let's dive in. You see it says here, no scientific evidence testing has been found to support astrology's claims. That's just a statement. It has nothing behind it. This is the one that's important. No mechanism of action. There is no proposed way that the positions of stars and planets could affect people. Again, this is a good question. How does it work? I'm going to show you. Then double-blind tests. These are all tests that were done to try to debunk astrology. 2 double-blind tests in 1985 confirmed that astrological natal charts cannot accurately predict personality traits. Of course, that's nonsense. Barnum effect. People tend to think that vague information tailored specifically to them, even when it's not. Again, more nonsense. Earth's wobble, celestial bodies in the night sky aren't in the same positions they were in when star maps were first made. Of course, this is easily explained and understood. Lack of progress. Astrology is not progressed and hasn't addressed critical scientific studies. Again, all of these are just false flags. Falsifiable predictions. Astrology does not make falsifiable predictions. This is just not true. Let's get into it. As it says, I've seen all these hackneyed, absurd debunks for decades, and most are bogus except for the mechanism of action. But that can be explained easily, and it's not a problem unique unto astrology. It's a problem of all sciences. Essentially, we do not know how anything happens. We see what happens, and we track that, but how is a mystery in all sciences, not just astrology. So again, as we go down, it says no mechanism of action. There is no proposed way that the positions of stars and planets should affect people and events on Earth. So as it says, this is valid. How does it work, right? But people ask astrologers to answer this and to answer for how the universe and astrology works, but they don't ask other scientists how their science works. For example, how does gravity work? Not what is gravity and what is it doing? We can see that, but how does it work? No one knows how it's working, how this invisible energetic quantum level works. So as I said, I actually plugged these answers, some of these, into ChatGPT. You could see I said, how does gravity work? And went down and gave me this answer. Then I had to interrupt it and said, I asked, how does it work? Not what is it? And then he says, you're asking about a deeper mechanism behind how gravity works, blah, blah. At present, there are 2 main ways, but when it comes to explaining how it works, there are limitations in our understanding. So here is the sort of aggregate. It says, when I plugged in that question, how does gravity work? This was the final thing. It says, while we have excellent models that describe what gravity does, the fundamental mechanism behind how gravity exerts its pull why mass influences space-time or why particles with mass attract each other remains one of the deepest unsolved mysteries in physics. The spark that causes gravity to function the way it does is still a profound and open question in science. So again, how does gravity work? Not what is it doing, how is it doing it? No one knows. It's very important. Carl Sagan relied heavily on this bogus claim. He dismissed astrology by saying to the effect, the gravity of the doctor in the room has more effect on you at the moment of birth than Jupiter. So he's asking how astrology works, using gravity as an example of a force that can be measured. But he doesn't even know how gravity works himself, how it works. So understand this. Even if his answer was, oh, okay, you're saying it's gravity, we still wouldn't know how astrology works because we don't know how gravity works. And again, I am being very explicit. We don't know how gravity does the thing it does. We can observe what it does, but we don't know how it does it. So again, he's saying he's using gravity as something that we apparently know, but he's saying the doctor in the room has more gravitational effect than Jupiter. But even at that level, it wouldn't matter because now we would say, okay, you're saying it's gravity, but how does gravity work? And then you could say something else, but then, okay, well, then how does that work? At some point, you have to find an origin of something. And there is none. We don't know how anything works. Keep this in mind. So, of course, he's blind to that fact. Most Western scientists are. Do you think Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye know that they are flying as blind as an astrologer is when they demand how astrology works? So you see these scientists say this all the time. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye. Usually it's something like, do you know you're not even your sign anymore? Because the planet wobbles. And on that wobble, if you were born as Scorpio, now you're Libra. So see, even astrologers don't know about the wobble. Again, this is why I'll talk more about this in a second. But they fly blind, even understanding that what underpins their physics, even things like gravity, they have no idea how that works either. And by the way, they also assail astrology. It's like, well, how does it work? This is the first line, and it's a good question. And the answer is no one knows how it works, but no one knows how anything works. You don't believe me? There's more. How about thoughts forming in the brain from the ChatGPT? The same thing. Thought formation is the result of electrical signals, neurotransmitter activity, and the firing of neural circuits across different brain regions. That's what we've observed. These processes happen on both conscious and unconscious levels. By the way, what are conscious and unconscious levels? I'll set that aside. Shaped by memory, emotion, and sensory input. However, the exact mechanism of how thoughts arise from this activity is still a major scientific mystery, particularly in terms of how subjective experience, what it feels like to have a thought, there's the thing, feels like to have a thought, because by the way, where do feelings come from? We also don't know. Comes from physical brain processes. So he's saying we can examine neurons firing in the brain, but how does that create what we perceive as a thought? No one knows. You dissect the brain, you'll see the neurons, and you can even see electrical impulses because, again, we can see it, and we're still very gross. We measure what we think is real literally just by what we can see. It's very gross. Not even by what we can hear, certainly not what we can feel. But the point is if you dissect the brain, you don't find any thoughts in the brain. So how does this brain tissue and matter and neurons and all of this other scientific mumbo jumbo, which it is at that point, it doesn't mean that it's not accurate. It means it doesn't answer the question of how thoughts are created. How does that lead to what you experience as a thought? He even said what feels like a thought. And we don't know, but even feelings, okay, where do emotions come from? Where do feelings come from? We don't fully know how emotions arise in their entirety. While we understand some of the processes involved, like the role of brain structures, e.g. the amygdala, prefrontal cortex. Again, we identify all these things, neurotransmitters. How these processes lead to the conscious experience of emotion remains a mystery. Specifically, how neural activity and body responses translate into subjective feelings is still an open question in neuroscience, often referred to as the hard problem of consciousness. So while we have models that describe what happens, the deeper how behind the emotions forming is still not fully understood. Again, this is right from ChatGPT GPT after all of these long, drawn out electrical activity in the heart, feedback loop. This is how does the brainstem know? Again, I asked how it knows, not what it is doing. You're asking important question about the brainstem knows. Again, all of these things, I kept prompting it about how these things happen, not what the thing is. We don't know how anything happens. We know what a lot of things are because we observe them. This is exactly what astrology does. Again, no one knows how anything works. Science sees what is happening, mostly through the eyes, like I say, and observes the effects, then predicts what will happen next. That is also what astrology is doing. That is exactly what it is doing. No one knows how metaphysics work, how invisible energy moves. Again, that's metaphysics. It's still a physical thing. There's still physics, but it's meta. It's basically what we can't see. We're still very biased by the things we can see or maybe hear, but metaphysics, the unseen, invisible, no one knows how that energy moves, how anything works on the energetic quantum hidden level. We see what's happening and observe the effects, then predict what can and will happen next. In this way, astrology works like every other science, exactly the same. We observe what these things have been doing now for thousands of years, and then we predict based on these absolutely concrete, ideas and structures and archetypes. Again, we know what the moon is. We know what the sun is. We're not trying to figure out what those things are. And I don't mean in the sky. I mean even also astrologically. And we see they arrange in a certain way, and it's remarkably uniform. And if we see it a certain way, we can know for sure certain aspects and very important aspects of people's personalities and all of that, which leads to this next one. Double-blind tests, astrological natal charts cannot accurately predict personality traits. Utter BS. It is incredibly accurate and uniform, like I'm saying. People who know nothing about astrology and have never looked at an astrology chart say this kind of stuff. For example, even first beginning level students, they can learn very easily how a Mars-Moon conjunction acts. This is what gets people interested because everybody at first is skeptics. We're all skeptics at first. We don't think it makes any sense. But then you see it and you're like, well, this absolutely works. Again, only people who have never looked at charts, never studied, would say this kind of thing because it is absolutely uniform. And again, I want you to understand this. Person has a Moon-Jupiter conjunction. Doesn't matter if it's Western astrology, Vedic astrology, it's going to be accurate because we know what the moon is. It's the connection to the heart. It's the aspect of consciousness and karma that is connected to the heart, feelings, and we know what Jupiter is. It's literally, the Sanskrit name is Guru. It's the teachings that give us hope, inspiration, purpose. When those two energies come together, it doesn't matter what zodiac, what sign, whatever, they're going to create an experience. Now, it's going to be colored and flavored by other things, but that's a unique thing. For example, like I have a Saturn-Mars square, right? I'm sorry, Saturn-Moon square. Saturn is in the square to my moon, aspecting it. That's going to be universal. In Western, because in the Western zodiac, it's Moon in Scorpio, Saturn in Aquarius. In Vedic, it's Moon in Libra, Saturn in Capricorn, but it's still Moon, Saturn, square. It's still going to be, it's a universal principle because they're universal. So again, they're remarkably uniform, incredibly accurate and uniform. And by the way, that's also a prediction. These personality traits that are uniform and pro forma and totally consistent are actually a prediction. It's not just fortune telling. Again, this is another way people debunk astrology because, when you make a prediction about an event happening, that's a much more subtle thing, which I'll talk about in a second. But the next is the Barnum effect. People tend to think that vague information is tailored specifically for them. Again, more utter BS. No one pays astrologers hundreds of dollars to blather Barnum effect stuff at them. This is just more ridiculous non-understanding of astrology. I've seen these dopey studies for years. James Randi has done some of them, if you know who James Randi is. Again, people who actually know nothing about this just repeat things from a Google search, wind up with this kind of statement, right? Barnum effect, that people will just believe anything because you said that it's about them. Look, again, on some very low level, low vibration level, this is true, but this has nothing to do with what real astrology is any more than you could use the same thing with like medicine. Like people who don't really understand medicine very well, you can start saying, oh, did you have this pain? Oh, that means this. And people will believe it. Again, there's nothing here. Barnum effect is utter nonsense relative to what I do and what astrology students do every day. It's not Barnum effect. It's accurate, correct statements. The Earth's wobble. Here's this one. The celestial bodies in the night sky were not in the same positions that they are when the first star maps were made. Again, scraping the bottom of the barrel. This is the claim that's meant to debunk the you're not really your sign after all stuff. By the way, the Earth's wobble is called the precession of the equinoxes, and yeah, astrologers know of precession. Currently, using the Lahiri Nuptia, the wobble is about 24 degrees west on the ecliptic from when the vernal equinox aligned with sidereal Aries. But anyway, real astrology is not horoscopes and sun signs that have changed because of the Earth's wobble. Again, very low vibration debunking here. Astrologers know, students know, it's one of the first things you learn when you actually start to learn it. We understand, and the first thing we start to learn is that you're not your sign. So again, when you hear people, these scientists, frankly, embarrass themselves by coming out with all these strong opinions about astrology, something they know nothing about, and they say silly things like this. I thought I was a Scorpio, but then I learned it was Libra. And astrologers don't even know. I'm not this. I'm that. They're just revealing their ignorance because that's not what astrology is. And here's a good example. I started using this years ago. Horoscopes, like you would see in the paper or whatever, are really very much akin to like aspirin is to Western medicine. Aspirin is a kind of quick fix thing that, you get a headache, you can take aspirin. It's a muscle relaxant. But you wouldn't judge the potential or what medicine is based on what aspirin is. So it's kind of like saying, well, because I can debunk the fact that aspirin won't cure a broken arm, then I can debunk the entirety of Western medicine. No, you're saying that because horoscopes because there's been a wobble and the Western horoscopes are different than the sky, that you've somehow debunked astrology. You haven't done anything except show you don't know what it is. Lack of progress. Astrology has not progressed and has not addressed critical scientific studies. None of that is true. Again, there's been discovery of outer planets. There's been discovery of other, for example, Pluto. When Pluto was discovered or thought and downgraded from a planet, in astrology, it was taken out of what you would call like the planets. But then we also found larger asteroids like Eris. That was included in Western astrology. Again, I do Vedic astrology, which doesn't do that, which doesn't really deal with those bodies. But scientific discoveries are always integrated. And in fact, a great example is the true node calculation, which we learned in I believe it was the early 70s, a more precise way to calculate the exact motion of the moon, which allowed us to more exactly calculate the lunar nodes, because the lunar nodes are the 3D spatial relationship between the orbits of the sun, moon, and the earth. And they have a mean retrograde motion. And back in the ancient times, the Greeks, the Indians, they didn't have the precision to measure that many times the actual orbit between the sun, moon, and earth is not moving backwards. In fact, especially when we get near eclipses, the lunar node stations and also even goes direct. So we have a true node calculation now, which is, again, integrating scientific progress. It always gets integrated immediately, pretty much immediately. We also have more accurate ways to even measure the sky and where the exact, for example, middle of the galactic plane is and other kinds of things where the spatial relationship, all of it gets immediately used. So again, just simply not true. And by the way, people who would cut and paste and believe this, they don't know any better anyway. They have no understanding of what they're even agreeing to. And like I said, the person who cut and pasted this for me to defend, he has no idea what any of this stuff means. It's just to him, now prove this. So it's just weird, and you should understand these answers and also understand that this stuff doesn't really make sense. And the people who would ask you to defend these things also, they don't have a clue. They don't look at charts. They don't understand these things. Again, another falsifiable predictions. Astrology does not make falsifiable predictions. Again, what nonsense. I and others make accurate predictions all the time, constantly. And again, I even told you, it's an accurate prediction to also understand a person's nature and their tendencies and their inner conflicts and all that. And again, If it's not, then go ahead and just do it blindly. Years ago, I had these examples where I would sort of take the challenge a little bit, and people would ask me to prove it or whatever. And I'd bring up people's charts, and I'd start saying things about them that maybe they wouldn't, like I would really have no way of knowing any of it. Some of it was actually technical and timing, or, oh yeah, I bet you recently you've been feeling a lot of this pressure. Maybe they have a Saturn transit or whatever it might be. And I'd say like 10, 15 specific things. And I would say, did I get anything wrong? And they're like, no, that was good. It's like, but I already knew all of that. And I would say to them, well, of course you did. I'm talking about you. But the important thing isn't that you knew it. The important thing is, how could I possibly know it? It's not that you already knew it. Of course it is. It's your life. I'm not going to say you're a chicken and you're going to sprout wings and fly and breathe fire or something. I'm talking about you. But the question is, how did I know that? And by the way, if it's no big deal, then why don't you do it? Go ahead. Do the same thing I just did. Start telling me a bunch of things about myself that you would have no way of knowing otherwise. Go ahead. I'm waiting. And of course they didn't, because they couldn't. So it's nothing but accurate statements as the day is long. And there are also predictions, and also, by the way, world events. Many of us have made very accurate world predictions for a long time. And again, even if it's not the exact moment that an exact specific thing happens, because again, it takes a long time, but you can see the energies of things happening. And I don't even need to go into it anymore. The only people who think this kind of stuff, again, are people who don't pay any attention. That's why probably someone like yourself who does watch astrology, you realize, yeah, astrologers do this all the time. Now, are they sometimes wrong? Yeah, but everybody's wrong at times. It's not astrology, it's astrologers. Astrologers have biases, they make mistakes, but so do doctors, so do scientists. There are human beings doing these things. Last one, astrology is different from astronomy, in which the scientific study of space, celestial objects, and the physics of the universe. Of course, yeah. But I'm sure those who believe all of this stuff know nothing about the astronomy either. Again, someone asked, they are like, oh, well, astronomy is the real science. Ask them, okay, do you know where Saturn is then? Like, what are you doing trying to debunk astrology when you don't even, okay, if astronomy is the important science, then ask them about astronomy. So do you know where Saturn is according to any zodiac? Again, those scientists and the debunkers know nothing about the astrology or the astronomy. So again, when I've gotten into these situations with people, I just ask them, I'm like, first, and again, I just kind of go through the list. First of all, no mechanism of action, right? But there's no mechanism of action for any of these things. We don't know the mechanism behind gravity. As much as we know what gravity is, we don't know how it works. We can observe, if I throw a ball, gravity is going to act upon that ball. I believe it's 14.7 pounds per square inch to pull the ball down to the earth. We know it, it's observable, it's measurable, quantifiable, but we don't know how it happens. Just because we know it happens doesn't mean we know how it happens. Same with astrology. We know it's happening because we do it all the time. We see it all the time, and it's real. How? Who knows? But who knows how any of these things happen? Astrological natal charts cannot accurately predict personality traits. Utter nonsense. Barnum effect. People tend to think vague information. Right, like people pay me a couple $100 to sit there and just say general stuff at them. Absolute nonsense. Earth's wobble. Yeah, we know all about precession. We know about zodiacs. Lack of progress. Not true. We always integrate scientific advancements, falsifiable predictions. Of course, it makes predictions. And yeah, we also understand the astronomy. Most astrologers or even astrology students understand the astronomy even more than most of these people that would debunk it. And I would bet you if I just went up to Neil deGrasse Tyson cold, or you did, and he started saying that, and you asked him, do you know where Jupiter is in the sky right now? I bet you 10 to 1 he doesn't know. I bet if you even asked him, do you know how long it takes the moon to go around the earth? Do you know how long it takes Saturn to go around the earth? Like if you asked even these guys, again, of course they could go research it, but if you just asked them off the cuff, I guarantee they don't even know this. So again, they would talk about astronomy as the real science, but I bet you 10 to 1, they don't even really know the astronomy. It's not that they can't find it out, but they've long forgotten that. And they're instead insulated in arrogance and certainty that, oh, astrology is pseudoscience anyway, so why would I bother learning anything about that? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this debunking of the debunking, and please like, share, and subscribe. And
thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel.